All right, let's bring in our special guest, Dr. Phil Heaton.
Real Dr. Phil.
The
Real
real
Dr.
Dr.
Phil.
Phil. That's right. The real Dr. Phil. That's what we're going to call him. Hey, Dr. Phil. Welcome. Welcome back to the show. I'm so happy to
Hi
see you.
guys.
You look so relaxed.
Oh, I've been enjoying watching the first segment of your show, and some of the passionate topics that you guys already started are so current and so brilliant. So well done to you guys, and thank you again for inviting me to another episode of your amazing show.
Well, thank you for joining us. So, Dr. Phil is a consultant orthopedic surgeon in the UK and an avid athlete. Now, Dr. Phil, our audience might remember you from our last season, season 2, episode 21. But if you don't mind, remind us a little bit about your background and how your wonderful sons, Buju and Little Phil, are doing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing them into the context. Buju and Little Phil are amazing young men in their own right. They're both over 6 foot, so I'm the dwarf in the family now. But they're both doing very well physically and professionally. Little Phil is one of the UK's fastest up and coming sprinters, and he's aspiring for the 2024 Paris Olympics 100-meter sprint and the 200-meter sprint.
Wow.
And Bridget's qualified from
Amazing.
university and is actually working professionally now in the maths and economics side of professional life. So he's enjoying paying taxes, I've said to him, which is a wonderful feeling for a father to
All right. So you wanted to talk about joint health. Let me just start out with a quick question. I've been getting treatment on my neck for a herniated disc, right? Now I play competitive volleyball about 3 to 4 times a week and do a lot of overhand hitting. So the first question I asked my doctor is, should I stop playing volleyball? And he said no immediately, unless it's a direct cause of the injury. He said um, that he's finding through the pandemic that everyone stopped moving around, stopped doing activities, and their joint and orthopedic issues are worse than the people are actually out there doing stuff, especially through the pandemic. So there's been more neck issues, hip issues, back issues. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Your doctor is absolutely right. And I'm pleased that he actually said that because some other doctors would have given you the wrong advice to stop. No, you should not stop. You see, movement is essential, and joint movement, every kind of movement, is essential. So, unless you're going to be directly in harm's way and get knocked over by a 40 kilogram, 40-ton vehicle in your sport, you should really carry on with your sport because we know that movement encourages lubrication. The special cells in our bodies are in the joints, the synovial cells, and the cartilage cells. They rely on movement as the signal to instigate their receptors to kickstart the production of fluid, whether it be oily syrup type synovial fluid or just draw and suck in more water into the joint. And everybody would understand that once there is oil on the kitchen floor, it's very slippery.
So
That's
movement
what
is
you want
key
on
to getting
every
that.
joint. So
So
that's what
movement is key to
happens with
getting that synovial fluid moving.
absolutely.
Okay.
So your doctor is right in saying you should carry on because at the end of the day, volleyball is not so much a contact sport, number one. So no one hopefully is coming over the net to attack you and tackle you. But it's still high impact because you're going to jump to quite significant heights. And I'm actually quite impressed about how high you guys get on the volleyball court when you want to smash the ball.
Yeah.
Now, it's the impact of landing that is going to cause you more pain in your neck when you land. But you can overcome all of that by regularly doing what we call active recovery. There are inversion tables. There are
I have
chiropractors
one
who will
actually, inversion table.
exactly who will apply traction on your neck in a controlled environment. And all of those things are essential. They will help. And that's the beauty of the post-pandemic environment. We've got so much technology now to help people. The problem with the pandemic and most of the governments globally is I think people over panicked into making us all stay indoors, do less, and not be as active. And if you look at most of the papers globally, patients have increased in weight by as much as 5%
Mm,
of their body weight.
weight gain. Yep.
Now, 5% of your body weight with physical inactivity is what causes that first picture I showed you. That's a real life patient picture. If you wouldn't mind, please uploading that.
Yep.
The
Absolutely.
clinical pictures that you can see here
Little
to
graphic picture
my
here.
left, exactly, to my left is the inner surface of the knee joint of a patient who I actually did a total knee replacement on. You can see to my right the outer half of that knee. The white glistering cartilage on that surface is pretty healthy. That is what the picture of the inside half, which has no glistering but just pure red sawbone exposed, looks like. And that is because as we get heavier, we take away water from the cartilage cells of the joint. And in taking that water away, there is complete compression across the joint. Now, this is another patient, and you can see here that the outer half of the knee, that's the left hand side of the picture, that's this side of the picture, has lost the gap in between the joint. And what then happens is sawbone crushes the joint and causes pain to the patient. And of course, we're only talking about the bone and joint today, but the effect of damage to the bone and joint is overstretched and slack ligaments, overstretched and slack muscles and tendons, which then means the joint can't actually do what it's supposed to do. And so pain becomes the primary issue.
All right. Let me get to some questions from our panel here. So, Ellen, did you have a question?
Yeah, so as someone not who's just in the pandemic like all of us and oftentimes has to hide away in my room for 2 weeks because I was exposed to COVID or something like that, but also as someone who may end up working remotely as a tech worker, what would you recommend for people to do to keep their joints moving if they're pretty much confined to their bedroom?
Right, and that's the beautiful question, Helen, because it reminds me so much of what we tried to do prior to the pandemic starting up. There were lots of apps that were coming up and popping up, and people trying to develop body weight exercises because,
Hmm.
after a while, the finances of the families become a priority, and gym memberships were becoming expensive for people. And so,
Hmm.
even before the pandemic, a lot of young people like yourselves, a lot of uh, tech companies were developing apps to allow people to undertake body weight exercises. And the beauty of body weight exercises is you can do them on the spot, whether you're in the bathroom,
Hmm.
in a living room, in
Hmm.
the garden,
So,
just by
body weight
yourself without
exercises, those are just
expensive,
exercises with no weights, just using your own body weight.
just your body, just your own body weight, and you could
Hmm.
start off with simple things like jogging on the spot, standing on one leg for balance. You can do
Hmm.
jumping on the spot. You can make it as interesting as you want. And the truth is, there's
Hmm.
so many free videos on YouTube and other apps
Hmm.
nowadays. You could
Hmm.
easily log on to one of those and just follow them, and they're serialized by calendars as well. So
Hmm.
um, there are some for lower limbs, there are some for upper limbs, things like press ups, sit ups. You can join groups for fitness, and I mean, I sound like I'm advertising for these companies, but the fact of the matter is, there is
That's
so
funny.
much free stuff out there that the modern world, the modern man or woman should be fitter than our ancestors in the
That's
1950s.
true.
But the sad
Hmm.
truth is we're not.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
That's true. Robbie Rock?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah. Dr. Phil, I'm just curious, what are some of the more common health issues that you are experiencing now that we've been in the pandemic for 2 years? So just now we're seeing some prolonged inactivity. So what are the more common issues that you're seeing?
I think the biggest one is a global pandemic. The real global pandemic is what we in orthopedic surgery call it, and that's obesity. Obesity was rising before the pandemic, but the pandemic absolutely poured fuel on a blistering fire and just turned obesity into a real pandemic now.
Mm,
And the consequences of obesity is the simple fact that we are becoming too heavy for the engine that pumps blood in the body, and that's the
the
heart.
heart.
So the incidence of heart disease is rising. And if the heart is not working properly, then many other organs are going to be dysfunctional. So there's a rise in diabetic rates, there are rises in hypertension rates, there are rises in heart attack, myocardial infarction, and strokes. And then you move on to the joints. In particular, in my specialty as a hip surgeon, one of the things I see the most is an increase in the rates of osteoarthritis. It used to be that patients in the 60s and 70s were the ones who developed advanced osteoarthritis. You can see, like in this picture here, there is significant wear and tear with the joint space completely eroded in that hip joint. And this is now occurring in younger patients, so 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, when in the past this was something you only saw towards the later stages of life. And that's because the greater increases in weight is causing the cartilage cells to lose their ability to retain function,
Hmm,
their plyometric functions, in particular, their excursion, their ability to deform when load is applied to them is lost.
hmm,
And so the individual is left with a worn out joint prematurely.
hmm,
And you'll be amazed at how quickly we degrade our joints. It only takes 5% weight and increase. So we're talking about the average fellow weighing 200 pounds. If you say 10% of 200 is 20, you're talking about 10 pounds increase
mm.
is all you need to start creating havoc on your hip and knee joints in particular. Now, those are the bigger, more resilient joints. The smaller joints of the fingers, the joints in the spine, um, don't technically show up until 10 to 15 years after the initial damage. But the hip and knee are less forgiving because, we tend to have to put our body weight and center of mass through them every day.
Yep. So I thought it was interesting how you said the pandemic has created another pandemic of obesity.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lizzie, your question.
Um, just to piggyback off of that, I think the pandemic has also created another pandemic of mental fatigue, especially as it relates
You said
to
mental fatigue.
mental fatigue as it relates to movement. Like everyone here, I'm still in the house. I'm quarantine queen. So I haven't really done anything outside of my apartment of note, for almost 2 years now. But I still work, right? And so I have a job where either all day I am in meetings or I am editing. Like I'm a journalist, so I'm editing a lot of stuff. And so when I'm not in meetings, when I'm in meetings, I'm sitting at my desk like I am right now. But when I'm editing, I'm in my bed with my legs propelled and just editing. But I'm not moving. Like you mentioned, Dr. Phil, I'm not moving. I'm not moving. And so I appreciate that you gave us some tips on exercises that we can do in the house. And listen, I have a full gym downstairs in my apartment building. Haven't been to it because of the mental fatigue. One, I don't want to other people, but
Yeah.
two, I'm tired because I think a lot of what our employers have done during the pandemic, they've piled on more work. I definitely have more meetings now than I ever did. And so last week, Dr. Phil, I had a situation where I had a severe pain in my right knee. And I've never had any pains in my limbs, ever. I was highly active before the pandemic, and I didn't know what it was. I was like, okay, is this early onset arthritis? Like, did I sleep on my knee, incorrectly in the bed? Like, I was
Years
very
ago.
worried. I started jogging in place. I started, trying to move because I was like, I can't have
Yeah.
this on top of everything else. I can't have this. So I appreciate the advice. But what do you suggest that I do to get me out of this spot, out of my bed, and downstairs to that gym? Because I do want to work out. And I have, put on some COVID pounds, even though I'm very petite. Aside from, boob weight, I'm very petite. And so if I gain weight, it show when you're short, if you gain even the slightest pound, it shows up on you immediately. And so
Oh yeah.
I'm just more concerned about, like, I don't want to get into the things that you're talking about where my joints start to be affected and start to erode and things like that. So
So you're
mentally,
asking how to get motivated, right? That's
exactly,
okay. Dr. Phil?
exactly.
I think it's a multifaceted answer that would supply the different components of that question. And the first component of that facet would be the individual. The second component is the global industrial and technological application services that are out there. In terms of the individual, everyone on this panel is a success in the first place. And the things that have gotten you to be a success is the fact that you're motivated, you're thorough with your individual lives, you're very careful and plan your day successfully. And it's all about extending those three components to your fitness life. The way I view my body and the way we humans should view our bodies are this is what gets everything done for me. This is what gets everything done for my family. This is what gets everything done for my professional life. So for every 8 hours that I spend in the hospital operating, there has to be the option of 8 hours to rehab that body, whether it be force myself to just sit in the gym, even if I'm not going to do anything, which is unlikely, but
Interesting.
make that
That's
time
interesting.
available for yourself, because if you don't make that time available, you're absolutely right. Employers are going to insist on more work to be done because you're working from home, you're no longer traveling, you're no longer spending the travel time that they used to add to our working day. So the individual has to do a better job of insisting on looking after their body. Otherwise, everything I said earlier on is waiting for you in that order: the diabetes, the hypertension, the stroke. Type 2 diabetes is one of the other evolving pandemic. It's not quite global yet, but type 2 diabetes is closely correlated with obesity. It's not the genetic inheritance of type 1 diabetes. This is
So I
diabetes that
have type,
occurs because,
so I
right,
have type
it's,
1, and
it,
that's another thing that I'm concerned about with not
so
working out.
type 1 is not the same as type 2. Type 2 is
Right.
specifically correlated with obesity. What
Mhm.
we have seen as obesity increases globally, so is type 2 diabetes. And it's not something that you would wish on anyone. So if we can reverse these things, which, all of those complications that I mentioned of obesity are reversible. If we can as individuals insist on dedicating uh, some time to ourselves, 2 to 3 times a week is what it takes of physical dedicated activity, it reverses all of those conditions.
Awesome.
Going back to the second part of that answer, it's the bigger global companies. It is time well overdue that the technological companies start looking at modifying uh, their exercise machines so that they're not so militant looking. They're much more
Mm,
attractive. We want to
that's
draw
an interesting
people.
thought.
We want machines that are going to be able to
Fun.
do more than just scare the faint at heart, if you don't mind me saying.
Hmm.
It shouldn't just be the muscle guys or muscle girls that want to go to the gym. They should be more friendly. They should be better design and flexibility to allow those of us who are not so motivated to enter a gym to come to a gym and see something that is friendly. Uh, I've been working with lots of innovative companies that are using virtual reality machines. They're using technological electrical stimulation to work on the different facets of fitness, speed, strength, balance, coordination, reflexive action. And all of these things are going to be able to help the future humans to become fitter because that's going to be what our planet depends on.
Okay. There's a few
You know what you just
questions online. We're running out of time.
just what he said that resonated with me was just going to the gym and just sitting there, even if you're not active. And obviously, you're going to go and be active. But like, I'm thinking about like, maybe if I just go and sit and absorb the
I like that
environment,
idea.
it would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
motivating.
And then you just
Yeah.
you'll figure out
Yeah.
something if you just set aside
I'll tell you a very
5
quick
minutes.
study. There was a very quick study done in Scandinavia where they looked at 200 people in two separate groups. The control group just went to the gym, sat in the gym over a 3 month period. The other group,
Mm,
obviously, were people who were members who exercise regularly. They actually saw, or as you would expect, that the other group who worked out ended up with better physiological parameters, which we would all expect. But the control group who went on to the gym but just sat in the gym and did no exercises, all of their physiological parameters also increased. And the
mm.
simple fact is, by being in a stimulating environment, you release
Motivates you.
more dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah.
These are hormones that the body sees as, oh, great, feed me this happy hormone. So it's not exactly a
Okay.
bad thing to go
Okay.
to a gym and actually just sit down and be present in the gym and not work out. Obviously, if you
Okay.
get there, eventually you will do some workout, and that's the aspiration.
Unfortunately, we're
All
really
right.
out of
I like
time. I
it.
do want to get these comments in real quick. Latoya Blakely says, I recently bought a yoga mat. Now I just need to find a beginner yoga YouTube channel or something. Uh, she also said, we're not even going to talk about how much weight I've gained in the last 2 years. Um, Mike Winter says, I love my adjustable height desk. It keeps me from sitting at my computer forever. Yeah, I
Good
bought one of
idea.
those as well. Uh,
Yeah.
Mike Winter says, not boob weight. And then Latoya Blakely says, she says, hey, that's a real thing, LMAO. um,
So funny.
and Jeanette Brown says, I never realized what a gift it is to not fear the gym. And then one final question. What are your thoughts on cannabis use for medical purposes?
Well, I'm genetically a Jamaican as well, even though I was born in the UK. And as a kid, we were always told that cannabis was something that you should never touch because it was marijuana, as it were, and ganja, as we say in Jamaica. But the medical field has just been turned upside down. If I look at my life from when I was a kid to now that I'm a consultant surgeon, um, it is it has many medical uses. It has to be done in the right environment. It has to be done with guidance. And
Mm,
I know there are friends of mine in Santa Monica, in Los Angeles, who've utilized medical marijuana for treatment of osteoarthritis as well.
Hmm.
And I believe one of them is running a study at the moment, which hopefully will be one of the first leading papers to prove that it is medically safe and useful to have marijuana or the
For
many other
pleasure.
names you want to call it cannabis, medical cannabis, as a treatment tool for osteoarthritis.
Okay. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us today,
thank
Dr. Phil Heaton, and telling
Yeah.
telling us
Thank
about
you.
joint health. Are there any final thoughts or words that you have for everyone out there?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we didn't get to talk about as well is nutrition. And I know you're running out of time, so I'll just say, it's important for us all to watch what we eat. Our ancestors, one of the perks that they have over us is they had to go out to hunt for their food. And so they rationed themselves, but they never spoilt themselves. And that's one of the things that the pandemic has also caused us to overdo. You know, we're always facing the fridge, going in and out of the fridge, and we've got to look at nutrition in a far better light as a generation.
Okay. Thank you again for joining us so much.
Thank you.
And we
My
will
pleasure,
definitely look to
guys.
have you back soon.
I look forward to it.